You are listening to the Unsoberly Sober Show. I'm your host, Magnify Maggie. This podcast will turn your perception of going sober upside down. We're going to be working from the inside out to get you that dream life. So make sure you stick around for the end of the episode where I'm going to walk you through our weekly positive pursuit exercise to begin rewiring that beautiful mind, baby. All right. Hello. Welcome back, my free and powerful friend. This is the Unsoberly Sober Show. I'm your host, Maggie Jensen, aka Magnify Maggie with Magnify Progressive Wellness. I've developed the Magnify method. It is alternative sobriety, alternative recovery, reconditioning therapy, thought reconditioning, fitness, nutrition, philosophy, thought psychology, self-image psychology, all wrapped up in one. I'm so excited to have you here as a listener in our episode number 35 now. And I'm going to be talking about something that kind of goes against the traditional sobriety grain. Now, I had a question. I didn't even let Rob know because I like these candid conversations. I want to know, Rob, in your sober journey, did you ever hear of or dive into the world of quit lit? Do you know what that is?
Quit lit.
Yes.
No, but it sounds lit.
It sounds lit AF, right? Okay, well, my alternative opinion is that you have to quit lit if you want to quit having problems with alcohol. But basically, Rob, there is a genre of books out there. If you go to Barnes & Noble and you go to like the self-help section, it's not necessarily the tag on the aisle that says quit lit, but it's a kind of colloquial term for books written by sober individuals to tell their journey of how they became a heavy drinker, addict, alcoholic, however they want to frame it, to now their completely sober, abstinent life.
So there is a category for this.
There's an entire genre.
Ooh, quit lit.
Quit lit.
Okay.
So some of the most popular quit lit books this day and age are This Naked Mind by Annie Grace. I actually really respect that book a lot. It's about the science, not so much, it does include anecdotal history of hers, but it's not so much of like the dwelling in the drinking past history. The book that I read that really spun a lot of new energy in my life was called Happier Hour by Bex Weller. There's a newer book, Unbottled Potential.
Wait, what was Happy Hour sort of about?
Happier Hour, I really resonated with because it was about a woman who she was like a vegan health coach by all standards with one group of friends. Everybody looked at her and like was like, you are healthy. You are the epitome of good habits and health. But then she had this whole other identity of like, party girl Bex. And it was her experience of saying, I'm going to go alcohol free for 100 days and just see what happens. And in that book, I felt seen and heard for like the first time ever. So I do believe there's a place for quit lit in your journey, but I don't believe that it's something that you should continue to consume month over month, year over year. And I see that a lot in traditional sobriety. I'm in a lot of like Facebook recovery groups. I'm in a lot of sober spaces. I'm kind of observing the traditional like pieces of advice, the traditional strategies. And just today even, I saw an anonymous post in one of the groups, and it's just this question. It says, you know, I had a really hard weekend trying Sober October. I slipped up. Now I feel like shit. I'm ashamed. And I read the comments and they're like, go to a meeting, call your sponsor, read Quit Lit. And those are like the top 3 things that I see. And you guys know I already have opinions about going to an AA meeting, how that's going to make you feel and what you're going to think about there. Your sponsor might be helpful, just like I am, you know, a piece of accountability, but depending on how healthy mentally and physically your sponsor is, that's going to be your results. But then that third piece of advice of like, make sure you read your Quit Lit. I don't think that is the way to go. I read that one Quit Lit book in January of 2020. That was my dry January attempt that actually kind of stuck. I had a drink towards the end of January, but that time in dry January, reading Quit Lit is what kind of taught me what not to do come February, and especially March is when I really was able to stick to my knitting. What I found when I was reading Quit Lit, although impactful in a way of like, I'm not alone, I'm not a freak of nature, here is somebody else that went through. I mean, I thought she was in my head. Like, I thought she was literally writing down my experiences verbatim, word for word in this book. And I remember crying. I think I read it in 3 days. I was crying. I was having epiphanies, all of these things. Great, awesome, amazing, right? And then I was like, I'm going to reread it. And I just kind of like read it every day of January. What I found was that whatever you consume via book, via podcast, via TV, via friends' conversations, literally everything you consume will dictate your thought processes. Now, it seems really worthwhile to read about stories of inspiring, successful, sober journeys, right? But let's be real. 3/4 of the book is typically about their struggle with alcohol. You're consuming thoughts and themes of struggle with alcohol in somebody else's life. But as you're reading, your imagination doesn't know that that's somebody else's life. It's playing the tape back of all of the struggle you've had in your life with alcohol. How big of a journey and how big of a job this is that you're taking on, it can seem very daunting. So although it helped me feel like I wasn't alone, equally opposite negative of that was it continued to have me spinning in the relation of everything to alcohol. So there I was saying, don't drink, reading about alcohol, although the story is very inspiring and she ends up being sober, happy, healthy. She's you can find her on Instagram, Bex Weller. You can find her on Instagram. She's still doing really great things. You can read the big part of the book and get that inspiring aftermath. But for the majority of the pages, it's about the parties she went to and blacked out. It's about the relationships that were just hanging on tooth and nail. It was about her insecurities. And as you're consuming that as a reader, you're going to start to interpret your own insecurities, your own struggles. You're going to be called to dwell in that space, right? And so what I decided to do, the reason why March turned to be so spectacular and so successful, why I said that I was really able to stick to my knitting, was that this light bulb went off and was like, hey, if you're always reading about alcohol, you're going to be thinking about alcohol more. What would somebody who does not struggle with alcohol thoughts be reading? What would somebody who doesn't have an obsession or someone who's not even tempted to drink, what would they be focusing on and consuming into their mind? And that's when I really started to navigate my new identity and what I wanted to be. And so that's when I bought, you guys know from previous episodes, if you haven't, even very first episode of Unsoberly Sober Show, I bought the Glute Lab book by Brett Contreras because I started to say, if I'm not drunk Maggie, I'm fit and healthy Maggie. And so I started to consume information solely about getting fit, getting healthy, exercise programs. There was not one mention of alcohol in that book. Although it might have been helpful to be like, hey, make sure you're not over drinking or else you're not going to make your gains. But I think that's kind of common sense in that realm. And I really enjoyed that. It was like they just left alcohol out of the equation. And so my mind stopped going there. And I was so focused on this fitness curriculum that if alcohol crossed my mind, it stayed surface level and it gave me the ick. It gave me the ick because now I was consuming information about bettering my health, my body, right? And so I switched up my thought habits so that instead of wanting to consume things that, it kind of is like misery loves company. Like, oh, I want to read Quit Lit because I'm suffering with alcohol. So I want to read about other people suffering from alcohol. Well, guess what? You know how they say the 5 people you spend the most time with, that's going to tell how your future looks. That's going to dictate your habits, how you spend your time. I believe the same is true about the things you read, the things you watch. That's going to dictate your habits, your state of mind. So if you're always reading about problems with alcohol, although those stories typically do end very well, if you're always reading about problems with alcohol, you're always going to be dwelling in that space. It's going to be very difficult to break those chains of identity that bind you to alcohol. It's going to be very difficult to stop relating every single thing in your life to whether you're drinking or you're not drinking. You need to be able to relate new things. Just like we talked about last episode with the law of relativity. Everything only is as energizing or as motivating or inspiring as what we're relating it to, what we're comparing it with. So make sure that when you're starting to pick out your books, the things you consume, audibles, podcasts, actual physical hard copy books, that you're picking out subjects that inspire you, not just in alcohol freedom, but in your overall life, your specific goals. Who's written a book about how they achieved those outside of alcohol? What is a goal that you have other than being sober? Because guess what? The goals that you have outside of being sober are what makes sobriety easy, fun, worthwhile. You end up just kind of not drinking and realizing you're sober without actually really having to force it or attempt to become a different person. You're just becoming a better version of yourself who doesn't need to rely on it. But if you're constantly reading about people who struggled with alcohol, guess what? You're conditioned to believe that about yourself as well. Earl Nightingale wrote The Strangest Secret, along with many other amazing lectures, seminars, programs. There's a program that's now available free on YouTube called Lead the Field. Earl Nightingale is the GOAT of personal development. He wrote The Strangest Secret, and the strangest secret is that we become what we think about all day long. I've mentioned this before, that all great leaders throughout history, no matter their background, their ethnicity, their religion, they all agreed and were historically recounted as saying, we all become what we think about all day long. Thoughts become things. So I want you to think about this. If I am waking up in the morning, wondering if I'm going to drink or thinking I can't drink. Oh, let me reach over for, AA's Quit Lit. The ultimate is the big book. Or I'm reaching for Unbottled Potential or Happier Hour. If I'm reaching for those, then I'm going to be thinking about alcohol. I'm going to be thinking about things in relation to alcohol. We become what we think about all day long. You yourself are not going to just poof into a bottle of alcohol. No, that's not what it's saying. It's that you're going to be the type of person that always is identifying themselves as to do with alcohol. Maybe not alcoholic, but hey, I'm the type of person that just really enjoys it. Hey, I'm the type of person that really needs it to have fun. I need it for stress alleviation. I wish I could not want it, but I want it and I don't know why. Well, because you're thinking about it all the damn time. It's become this thought habit, and we have to break that thought habit by focusing on new things. And yes, it will feel foreign at first, but drinking at one time felt foreign to you. That was unnatural at one point in your life when you first tried it. And then you kept practicing, and now it's got a spotlight on it. So now we need to practice something else that feels foreign until the spotlight starts naturally shining on that, right? So you can either choose to read about people and their drinking habits, thus thinking about yourself and your drinking habits, or you can choose to pick up something really inspiring in a different direction. I kind of realized this is a big lesson in my life. I realized that I'm going to stop going to people who haven't experienced or done what I want to do. I'm going to stop going to them for advice or inspiration or learning. And for me, because I do follow some of these authors and these speakers now after they've written the book, and the book ends all beautiful and they have the bow on it and it's like, my life is now gorgeous. Well, then I follow them and I watch them and I hear from them and they're saying, today was still really hard. I had to push through. I'm sober today. And that's really my only big win. But it's a big win, right? And I'm like, not discounting that. It's a big win not to drink if that's what you're still struggling with. But I was like, I don't want to keep going to people and reading their books if they're still struggling. I want to learn from people that are like, alcohol who? I want to learn from people who never had this issue. I want to learn how they think, how they relate things to other things. I want to learn how they believe in themselves outside of whether or not they drank alcohol. And that's when I started to really stumble upon seek and you shall find is for real. That's when I stumbled upon personal development literature. I mentioned Earl Nightingale. I've talked about Napoleon Hill before. Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, Dr. Joseph Murphy, the author of The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, Jen Sincero. I've talked about Bob Proctor, my favorite. All of these people, they weren't talking about bouncing back from being drunkards. They were talking about coming from nothing, adverse experiences in childhood, and shaping them into their superpowers as adults. And I was like, that's exactly what I want. I don't want my whole adult life to be shaped by alcohol. Rob, what do you got?
That's funny that you said that because when the only successful thing that made me quit was personal development.
Which books?
Just no. I mean, I didn't even know. I didn't read any book. That's the thing that worked is I went to the gym versus when I was trying to quit, I was just thinking about quitting and how I couldn't quit. And
Isn't that weird?
Guess what worked? Me moving away, different environment, and then going to the gym and just becoming the next thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like so I mentioned Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. I've said this quote before. The solution or prescription to any problem is to take your mind off of the problem and put it on the image you wish to create. So in reading about Quit Lit, thinking all the time about quitting, needing to quit, I'm unable to quit, I'm incapable, what does that make us feel? What does that attract into our lives? Our brain has a reticular activating system, literally like a little flypaper system in our brain, where if we're thinking about something, it's going to find it in our external environment. So if I'm thinking about not drinking, unfortunately, guess what I'm going to see all day? Alcohol themes, billboards, signs, people drinking, alcohol on tables. Guess what types of thoughts I'm going to attract to myself? This would be better with an alcohol cocktail. This would be better if I could drink. I'm so bored without drinking. Those thoughts are also going to be attracted into our brain. But if we take our mind off of the problem and we put it on the image we wish to create, first of all, we have to create that image, right? So I'm guessing you started to see yourself being healthy, like having energy, being in control, being disciplined. That's the image. And if we can just keep our mind focused on that, we can personally develop our ass right out of problematic drinking. And I would say Quit Lit makes about as much sense as AA. Let me go and ruminate over all of the problems that I've had with alcohol and hang out with people that are still having problems with alcohol, or read these things about people having problems with alcohol. And although the story might end on a good note, now I'm watching them on Instagram or on TikTok and they're still talking about problems with alcohol 5 years after they wrote the book. I don't want to be like that. That's literally putting all of the attention on the problem. So the actual solution is to let that go. And I think we're conditioned that that doesn't work because of like therapy, the way AA is, and Quit Lit in general. Like all of these things in our culture make us think like the more we focus on the problem, the faster we're going to solve it. But we don't actually come up with solutions when we're engulfed and immersed and focusing solely on the problem. We come up with solutions when we're detached from the problem and we're actually kind of looking down on it from an elevated perspective, from that high vibe energy walking out of the gym. You look down at the problem of, man, I wanted alcohol yesterday, but today I know, hey, I'm going to go eat my healthy food. I'm going to drink my water. I don't need that. You're able to just let those thoughts go instead of ruminating and dwelling and getting emotionally involved in them. The moment you get emotionally involved in a negative thought, your imagination thinks that's what's happening right now. So you could have had a poor drinking experience 5 years ago. And if you're reading Quit Lit, that triggers that memory from 5 years ago. All of a sudden, your body thinks that you're back there. And your mind starts to believe that you're that same person that was existing 5 years ago, but you're not. And if you can control your attention and ensure that you're not consuming things and hanging out with people that still struggle, say, who am I? Who would I be without this struggle? What type of person? Okay, where are those types of people hanging out at? I want to learn from them. I want to read books by them. I want to spend time with them. Because if I go sit around in a room with 5 people who also struggled with alcohol, who maybe still struggle with alcohol, guess what they're going to be talking about? And guess what the energy of that room is going to be? Versus if I go hang out with a group of my entrepreneur friends, Rob and I and Felicia and Nikki, like that, like we probably would never talk about alcohol. We might mention it, but like we're talking about goals. We're talking about our next ventures. We're talking about our big visions. We're talking about our health, you know, especially when the girls and I are together, we're talking about our gym time. We're talking about our progress there, how our clothes are fitting, how our energy levels are, like all of these things that have nothing to do with alcohol that are helped when we don't drink it, obviously, but we're not talking and we're not sitting around. There was an episode that I did, oh gosh, I believe it was like back in the teens, maybe 14, 15. If you go back in Unsoberly Sober Show and look for the episode titled Your Toxic Ex, alcohol is very much like that. If you are going into a room, sitting down, talking to a therapist, talking to a group of friends about your toxic ex, you're still going to be thinking about them. You're going to be relating your life to them. You're probably going to be romantically involved emotionally with that idea of them. You're going to literally feel the same way you felt when you were with them because you're just talking about them and you're giving them energy. Alcohol is the same thing. You have to spend time away building your new identity, personally developing yourself without ruminating and dwelling over the toxic ex. Control your thoughts. Control what you consume. Now, I am going to be a little ironic, I guess, because I myself, I am writing a Quit Lit book. After saying all of that, I am writing a Quit Lit book. But here's the thing. Okay, I want to break this down. Remember when I said that a lot of the authors of Quit Lit books, if you look into their life now, they're still struggling, but they are kind of demanding absolute sobriety for themselves? I think that that already gets readers on edge, a little defensive. They're like, okay, I can read about this story. It's inspiring. It's heart-wrenching at moments, but then at the end, oh, good, it all happily ever after ending. But they're going for complete abstinence, 100% sobriety. And now if I look them up on the internet, I kind of see them still having days where they're talking about how they just got to make it through the day without a drink. If that's the energy of the Quit Lit book, then readers are going to probably read it for entertainment value and because they're conditioned to believe so, but they're going to be a little bit on edge and they're not going to fully buy into it because from the reader's perspective, opening the book, they probably don't believe that they themselves can be 100% sober. They probably don't think that they need that. They probably don't want that. But they're down for like learning to control it and cut back and maybe one day decide to go sober, but they're not ready for that right now. So if there were a Quit Lit book where the author gave all the dirty details of her life, talked about the conditional circumstances that programmed her to believe that alcohol was the answer for things that was really just trauma, not a genetic predisposition, not a disease of addiction. If a reader were able to read a story where it's connecting the dots. Oh, she learned this in childhood, so alcohol solved that problem. She learned this in childhood, so alcohol solved that problem. She learned this in childhood, so alcohol solved that problem. And then she was able to heal all of those traumas so that now if she wanted to have a drink, she can with positive discernment and control and true moderation. Now that's something I can get my teeth bit into. That's something I can buy into. I think that the book that I'm writing is going to be kind of coined in my mind as the last Quit Lit book that you'll ever need. I want you to be able to read something that connects the dots for you in your life through my own vulnerable stories of why you might turn to alcohol. Maybe it will help spark memories of when you learned to be a people pleaser, when you learned to need external validation, when you learned that other people's goals for you were more important than your own authentic goals. And so now we're using alcohol as a tool. I want my book to be a guide for you to connect the dots of why you drink now. What is the function of your drinking so that you can heal that, fill those voids with something fulfilling and purposeful so that if and when you decide to have a drink down the line, you do it with a governor that's controlling your behavior. You do it from a position of, yeah, I'll enjoy one, but I don't want to go overboard because I've got these beautiful things in my life and I don't want to feel like crap. And I've got this goal and that goal and I am in control and I'm not somebody who uses alcohol to escape my life anymore because I've built it up to be something so darn beautiful. And I see my book being a stepping stone from me talking about my sober journey in this last Quit Lit book that you'll ever need or read to magnify personal development books, books about paradigm shifting, books about authenticity over attachment, books about getting to your goals, getting on the frequency of your goals. I don't really want to write another book about alcohol. In fact, one day I see this podcast turning into something that has nothing to do with alcohol because we are all so far beyond it. It's a thing of the past. We don't need to listen to that or talk about alcohol anymore because we're actually focusing on our gym gains, bodybuilding, running a marathon, eating, I don't know, maybe you love keto or paleo or whatever it is. You know, maybe you love counting macros. Maybe you love public speaking, volunteering, getting on the treasury board of your county. What is it called when like everybody gets together and they're like in a community group and the Chamber of Commerce? Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. Maybe it's that you're getting involved more in your work life. You're creating a business. Like I want to create those types of pieces of literature so that you have more personal development. But I do want to start off with my story so that people can see that, hey, you can grow up in trauma experiences, and then you can have all of these self-sabotaging experiences, getting kicked out of the military, getting fired from Hooters, all of these things because of alcohol, multiple DUIs. Like you can go through that shit, and then you can still personally develop yourself out of that. You can still be somebody amazing, impactful, powerful. You can be that. But I do think it takes, a little stepping stone. So the last quit lit book you'll ever need, and it's also going to be titled Unsoberly Sober. The book will be Unsoberly Sober, a memoir of healing generational curses. So I hope that you're able to kind of listen today and say, you know what? Maybe I have been reading and ruminating and dwelling on alcohol thoughts, and that makes sense why I'm not able to banish these alcohol thoughts. I've been reading and consuming, maybe even on your social media, you've been following a lot of pages. There are really inspiring pages, but then there are also pages where even sober celebrities are saying, Jamie Lee Curtis is so famous for this. She's like, my sobriety will be my best legacy because every day is a fight. Every day is a battle not to drink, and every day I win. And I get where she's coming from, but I don't think this needs to be a battle. I don't think this needs to be a battle. This can actually be something so easy if you know how to focus your mind, if you know how to go after authentic things, if you know what to consume and how to channel that energy for you. So maybe you're listening and you are in the middle of one of those quit lit books. Go ahead and finish it out. Test it out. See how you feel. Again, it was really empowering for me in the beginning of 2020 to read that in dry January, but it also helped me learn that, hey, that's what I'm thinking about all the time. Of course, that's what I'm obsessing and what I'm going to cave into as far as my behavior goes. This week's exercise is to get involved in personal development book. I'm going to give you kind of a list of 5 here in just a moment to either download on Audible or get hard copies of. I actually like to go double down on it. I'll get it on Audible and then I'll get the hard copy. I'll listen on Audible and I'll kind of remember things that I liked, which chapter I was in, and then I'll go back with the hard copy and I'll highlight. Because my brain, I really like to see the words on the piece of paper because then I can envision them later on and I can recall them better. But Audible or hard copy, I'm going to give you 5 books to start with, or maybe just 1 to start with. But then your other piece of homework is to curate your social media. So if you're following TikTok accounts, if you are following Instagram accounts that make sobriety feel like it's just the hardest chore on earth, that makes sobriety make you feel disempowered, powerless, or maybe even you're still following pages that glamorize drinking, that kind of make jokes about hangovers and very lighthearted about hangovers. And it's like, it's okay, you're hungover. There's this one that's like, this guy is like, if you're going to be hungover, why not get paid for it? You should be hungover at work. And if you're following pages like that, unfollow. Curate your social media so that you only see really inspiring things, because that's an aspect of consumption. So you're going to be minding what you're reading and then what you're absorbing through social media. So some of my favorite accounts on social media, again, not sober influencers, not sober coaches, anything like that, but people like Ed Milet. I really enjoy Ed Milet. His dad was an alcoholic. So I resonate with pieces of his story. Ed Milet, the Proctor Gallagher Institute Instagram, which is Bob Proctor. They do clips and clips and clips of his seminars throughout the years. Amazing account to follow, Proctor Gallagher. Another account would be the Motivation Mindset is a good one. They do clips of Andrew Tate from time to time. You guys know that I'm an Andrew Tate fan. They do clips of different spiritual leaders talking about mindset. So I really like that. There are so many different ways that you can communicate to the algorithm that you want inspiring content. And I think it's easy to get tricked into thinking that a lot of sober content is inspiring when actually it's just relatable. You're like, oh, well, I can relate to this person talking about how hard sobriety is. Yes, but does that belief help your sobriety to believe that it's really hard? It might be relatable, but does that actually propel you into better feeling thoughts? Or does that highlight how hard sobriety is for you? So find and curate the most uplifting, personally developmental Instagram accounts that you can. Of course, right now I'm like drawing blanks on who I even like. Of course, Mel Robbins, Tony Robbins is great. Jocko Willink, love him. His podcast is amazing. Joe Rogan, all of these people what's funny is that they really tie in fitness with mental health and positive thought and personal development. It's like the chains of the links of the chain come together, and it just makes sense. When you take care of your mind, you take care of your body, you take care of your goals, and you just feel good. And so you're going to see these themes really intertwined in all of those. Books, though, let's talk about the top 5 books for personal development. One of the first that I would say to get your toes wet has a little bit of metaphysical themes in there. You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero. If you have already read this book, read it again. Get it on Audible if you didn't the first time, because the way she tells her stories, her own narration of her book is just hilarious. You will find yourself laughing as you're listening to her talking about her stories. Jen Sincero helps describe the power of the subconscious mind, the practice of manifesting, limiting beliefs, how to go after your goals. She talks about it in such a foundational, like lay person way. You don't have to feel like you're a doctor or an intellectual person to really absorb it. Just makes sense. If you've already read that one, might not make a lot of sense now, but read her book, You Are a Badass at Making Money, because she takes all of those principles, those thought principles, those self-image principles from You Are a Badass, and she elevates them into being worthy of making good money. And those are really valid goals in sobriety, so that you're not focused on sobriety. You're focused on becoming the next version of yourself, leveling up, healthier habits, thought habits, physical habits, mental habits, all of the above. You Are a Badass. Next up, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Dr. Joseph Murphy. This is a book that we start with as a 12-week member or VIP client of Magnify. We start with The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, and there's specific lessons in there that we hop around to. Specifically, chapter 18 talks about addiction, and Dr. Joseph Murphy said that addiction is not a disease. You are only afflicted with instability. You see yourself as the type of person that needs alcohol to emotionally regulate. So The Power of Your Subconscious Mind is beautiful, amazing. It ties in science with energetics of like how what we believe in our subconscious mind manifests literally in our physical body and in our reality. Next up would be Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. He doesn't talk a lot about alcohol. He does talk about intemperance being one of the major causes of failure. The way that Napoleon Hill will off the cuff talk about alcohol in some of his really old lectures, he was from like the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. So like if you find a Napoleon Hill lecture on YouTube, it's black and white and it's really kind of crackly, but it's still amazing. But he'll be like, I'll take a drink out at a party. Sometimes I don't drink it, but I take it and I put it in my hand and I walk around and I have great conversation because I don't want people to be distracted by whether or not I'm drinking alcohol. It's just really interesting to hear successful people, their perspectives on alcohol. You start to absorb that. And I think there was one section either in Think and Grow Rich or in a lecture about Think and Grow Rich where Napoleon Hill said, one drink is fine, 2 drinks maybe, but more than that, you're just silly. And it was like hearing him as an old man say that. I was like, I wish somebody would have told me that when I was 12 or 13. Like that wasn't the perspective. That wasn't the conditioning that I got around alcohol. It was like, drink and you'll have fun. Drink and you'll be more fun. And like, had I got this conditioning of like, drinking too much will make you really silly, I think that would have been really great. But that kind of thought process is what reconditions your mind now about alcohol. You can think it's the worst thing in the world consciously, but if you still believe deep in your heart that it's fun, that just needs to be reconditioned. So when you hear these successful people saying, actually, it's not the funnest thing in the world. The most fun thing in the world is realizing that your goals have all come to fruition, realizing that you can do what you say you want to do. You keep your personal promises. That's what's fun. Alcohol is just like a boring bystander. So Think and Grow Rich. Next up, Born Rich. You Are Born Rich by Bob Proctor. I believe that if you go to his website, Proctor Gallagher Institute, he has the PDF version free for download. So that one is really great. He really articulates the laws of the universe. We've talked about those. We talked about those actually last episode. He talks about the laws of the universe being worthy of money, worthy of wealth, and not just money wealth, but health and prosperous relationships. I think that's a really great one. And then I would say anything by Jocko Willink, Dichotomy of Leadership, Extreme Ownership. Those are a little bit more military themed and a little bit more like organizational hierarchy as far as like if you're a CEO or if you're a business owner, but he ties in personal leadership. And I think personal leadership is what's lacking when we're undisciplined in our drinking. We need to be able to be a leader for ourselves and have discipline. Discipline equals freedom is one of his taglines that is just so beautiful. So Jocko Willink would be number 5. I know that after we get off this podcast, I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, I should have said this book and this book and this book. So maybe next episodes, future episodes, I will bring some more to your attention. But that's the exercise for the week. Curate your social media so that you're just consuming inspirational things. Be very intentional with this and don't spend too much time there. 10, 15 minutes at a time on social media. Do not melt your brain. Then getting into a personal development book, a book that helps you see goals outside of drinking, that makes drinking just sound blah, boring. Why am I even obsessed with this? Why am I even tempted with this? You have to start seeing yourself in a different light rather than relating yourself always to alcohol, which is what will happen if you spend the rest of your life reading Quit Lit. All right, you guys, that is it for today. Keep me posted how you're reading, how your social media living life is going. I want to know. I want to know what books you're getting. I want to know what you're reading and how you're feeling about it. I want to know your experiences, your takeaways from those. Leave a comment, message me on Instagram. Let me know you're a listener and what you're finding in those books that you are getting your hands on between now and next week. Remember, like, subscribe, share this episode, or share this entire podcast show with somebody that you think it would really make a helpful impact on. And think different to drink different. Think different to move different. Think different to eat different, live different, all of the above. It all goes down in the mind. And you are free and powerful. Don't ever forget that. Signing out, Magnify Maggie. See you next time.
It means the entire world to me that you have been here with me, letting me share my experiences and hopefully helping open your eyes to a bright, beautiful life ahead of you as well. So if you are loving this show, please, please, please subscribe, like, comment, and especially share this with somebody that might be in need. Please help get the word out. Word of mouth is so important. And I know that you're somebody special who can help me in this mission for thinking differently in order to drink differently or never again. Make sure you reach out if you have any questions you want discussed on the podcast. I'm here for it. So I'll talk to you soon. Signing out, Magnify Maggie.